accounting.
Nidhi, you please start. The program is started.
Yeah. Good evening, all of you. I just a moment, sir. Ek second. I welcome you all in this webinar of overview of forensic accounting and investigation standards. We are with us the SAFA chairman, CS Nanda sir, Vice President CA Nihar and Jamrusia sir, President SAFA HM Bandara sir, and our eminent speakers CA Durgesh Pandey sir and Anand Prakash Jangir sir. So now I introduce CA Nanda sir. CA Nanda sir is a chairman of Digital Accounting and Assurance Board and Internal Audit Standards Board of ICAI, and the chairman of SAFA, that is the South Asian Federation of Accountants. And he is also vice chairman of Banking, Financial Services and Insurance Committee, ICAI. He holds so many positions as a Central Council member in various committees and standing committees. He is a member of Quality Review Board set up by the Government of India. He was also the member of SEBI Advisory Committee on Primary Markets and the Committee on Mutual Funds, and represented ICAI on SEBI Committee on Disclosures and Accounting Standard. Now, I request Nanda sir to please give the welcome remarks.
Thanks a lot, Nidhi ji.
Thank you so much, sir.
The Honorable President SAFA, Shri Bhandara sir, the President, past President ICI and Vice President of SAFA, CA Nihar Jambusaria sir, the Reverend Speaker of the day, CA Durgesh Pandey ji, Secretary of the Board, Amit Gupta, the technology support, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, my unconditional apologies as there is a serious communication problem where I'm sitting. There's a technology snag, and therefore my video is not visible to you. So, ladies and gentlemen, today's webinar is on overview of forensic accounting and investigation standards. All members of in Dhaka on 15th of October, where we'll be taking and discussing new initiatives. 16th is the board meeting. We'll be discussing new initiatives which the IT committee can take. So today's overview of forensic accounting and investigation standards would largely cover overarching documents, which is very important, so that you have a total notch of all documents which are used during the course of the forensic assignment. The discussion will be on key concepts on which the entire forensic standards are framed. You will have an overview of the engagement management and executive assignments, how to execute assignments, and what are the important things which you need to keep in mind. And lastly, there shall be discussions on specialized areas, on reporting and quality of the work which is undertaken by you. When you speak of these standards, the most important thing which one needs to bear in mind are, number one, these standards are designed to help the forensic investigators to master the subject matter, to understand how you can use evidences that can be used as an admissible evidence once it goes to the court of the law for prosecution purposes. Second important thing, the distinguishment between audit and forensic audit, and the importance of all legalities which come during the course of the assignment. The third, how you need to focus on key technical aspects and procedures, which are again very paramount once you want to advance with the forensic assignment. The fourth is highlight importance of digital evidence. Very, very important. Digital evidence is one of the best evidences which is admissible by the court of law and used by the prosecuting agencies. And finally, help to avoid pitfalls, especially in reporting. Reporting has to be so crisp that not even an ITA can be challenged or asked. Your board, the DAB, is doing a lot of things. We are doing a post qualification course on information system audit. We do certificate course on forensic accounting and fraud detection. We do courses on blockchain technology for professional accountants. Your board does executive development programs on advanced Excel and data dashboard, CAD tools, KNIME, Power BI, cybersecurity. We also undertake SAP Power user training programs. We undertake e-learning courses on IT-driven topics. Yes, we have forensic labs, which are more commonly known as data analytics labs at Noida, at Chennai, at Center of Excellence, Hyderabad, Kolkata, Chandigarh, and Kanpur. We hold technologies, summits, conferences, seminars, and webinars, and have a large treasure of technical literature. At the end of my discussion, what is expected of an investigator? Number one, investigator needs to clearly understand and agree the mandate received from the client or the stakeholder. We have to serve not only the client or the stakeholder, but also the regulators in the government. The second important thing, we need to understand a risk based, well planned, detailed oriented execution of the assignment so that all aspects are taken into account. We need to deploy concepts of applying hypotheses and build a scenario of modus operandi. More importantly, we need to determine, mine out the data evidence which is unavoidable, and using an expert is always expected so that the right evidence is given at the right place. Findings which you make may be subject to detailed cross examination in the court of law. Therefore, everything has to be very sequentially arranged along with the documents. And lastly, you need to have expression of independent opinion, especially guilt or innocence, which is not permitted. And therefore, you have to have the right evidence in respect to any confession made by any of the parties. So this falls under the head interviews. I want to tell you that in next webinar after 15 days, we will try to take some issues on how to conduct investigations and how to go ahead with interviews so that you can understand the entire modus operandi. I have with me the Honorable Vice President and President of SAFA, so I'll not speak much. They are people of great eminence and have led their entire life serving this great profession. So I would request Nidhi ji to invite and take hold of the entire session. Thank you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to express my views to you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your welcome speech. Now, I would like to request Vice President. Now, I would like to introduce Vice President SAFA, Sir Nihar N. Jamrusia, sir. Sir, he is a man of professional wisdom, vision, and strong organizational skills with a firm belief in all-round inclusive growth of Indian Chartered Accountancy profession. He was the president of ICAI for the year 21-22. Now he is a vice president of SAFA and also a member of Professional Accountants in Business and Advisory Group of International Federation of Accountants. C. Jamrusia sir was a member of Government Accounting Standards Advisory Board and Audit Advisory Board. He was a member of E-Commerce Committee formed by the Ministry of Finance and Peer Review Committee of Central Board of Direct Taxes. He has made noteworthy contributions as a chairman of IND-AS Implementation Committee, International Tax Committee, and various other committees. C. Jamrusia sir has also addressed more than 900 seminars like direct tax, accounting standards, international tax, and professional development, and alike. Now, I request Nihar Jamrusia sir to please give the words of wisdom.
Thank you, Nidhi. Good evening, everybody. President SAFA, President K. Bandaraji, the Chairman of IT Committee, CA Nandaji, today's speaker, Durgesh Pandeji, and all the participants who are there on virtual mode. Let me at the outset thank Chairman of IT Committee for taking up this initiative and proposing to the President SAFA that IT Committee wants to make a presentation on forensic accounting and investigation standards. And I must also thank President SAFA for allowing the committee to have this webinar today for the benefit of all members of SAFA countries. The program has been so designed that today the speakers will discuss all the forensic accounting and investigation standards which the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India developed last year. And I may only inform you that last year, when these standards were being framed, all the stakeholders in the country were involved. The auditors, the users of forensic accounting and the forensic auditing reports, they were all involved in framing these standards. Exhaustive exercise was carried out. And as Nandaji explained, from key concepts to quality control, every aspect of forensic accounting and investigation is covered by these standards. And how these standards will help us. It is a double-edged sword. It will help the users because they will have surety that once these standards are followed by the forensic auditors, there is uniformity in quality of accounting and investigation. There is uniformity in reporting, and high standards of quality are maintained. On the other hand, if we look at this from the point of view of auditor, again, it will ensure uniformity for auditors. They will have these standards as the basis for their investigation that they carry out. And in case of disciplinary cases, it may help them to protect their interest if they have followed these standards in letter and spirit. So whether we look at these standards from the point of view of users or from the point of view of auditors or the accountants, it is a win-win. It creates a win-win situation for all. And that is why today's webinar is so important, and these learned faculties will bring out the various aspects of forensic accounting. Of course, in forensic accounting and investigation, some element of subjectivity goes, and that is where these standards help us in standardizing the entire process of accounting and investigation as much as possible. So with this, once again, my hearty congratulations to the committee for taking up this webinar today. And I'm sure the participants will add a lot of value after the webinar is over. Thank you so much for inviting. It was a pleasure talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your words. Now, I would like to introduce our President of SAFA, H.M. Henke Bhandara, sir. He is a BCom graduate, fellow member of CA Sri Lanka, fellow member of CPM Sri Lanka, fellow member of AATSL, and a member of ABBSL. He is a fellow and founder member and is a vice president of Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka. And this is the first time that CMA Sri Lanka representative has been appointed as a vice president of SAFA. He has been associated with SAFA since 2005 in various capacities. He is the recipient of CMA Award for Excellence in Business Management at the SAFA CMA Management Accounting Summit held in 2012. He also had the opportunity of working very closely with all Sri Lankan past president of SAFA. He is a past president of Association of Accounting Technicians of Sri Lanka, past president of Association of Professional Bankers, Sri Lanka, council member of CA Sri Lanka, treasurer, Organization of Professional Association of Sri Lanka, director, Institute of Bankers of Sri Lanka, and council member of Sri Lanka Institute of Advanced Technological Education. He was a general manager, CEO of National Savings Banks of Sri Lanka, chairman Net Wealth Securities Limited. Currently, he serves as an advisory council member of APBSL, independent director, Prime Finance PLC, and council member of Institute of Chartered Professional Managers of Sri Lanka. Now, can I request sir for his few words?
Right. Thank you for the introduction. Good evening to all of you. Mr. Nihal Jambuzaria, Vice President SAFA and President IC, past President IC India. Mr. C.S. Nanda, Chairman, SAPA Committee on Information Technology and Digital Accounting and Assurance Board of ICA India. Eminent speakers, moderator, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me thank the Chairman, SAPA Committee on Information Technology for organizing the second webinar on the same subject within a very short period and inviting me to address you all. One of the main objectives of the committee is to promote replication of forensic accounting and investigation standards as formulated by ICA India amongst SAPA member bodies. I also would like to appreciate the support extended by the Vice President SAPA, Dr. Mitra, President ICA India, and the Council to organize this awareness session for the benefit of the accounting fraternity in the South Asian region. It is a true pleasure for me to participate in this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, International Federation of Accountants suggests that both forensic accounting and fraud awareness could be enhanced as part of the formal qualification and continuous learning processes. They also encourage professional accountancy organizations to ensure their members to have access to relevant high-quality continuing education and certification programs. In that context, one of the most important initiatives taken by the Digital Accounting and Assurance Board of the Institute was issuing of forensic accounting and investigation standards. It is pertinent to mention that Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nepal has introduced an online certificate course on forensic accounting and fraud detection as a post-qualification course with the technical support of ICA India. ICA Bangladesh has published several articles to make members aware of the importance of the subject area. Pakistan has set up a separate organization, namely the Institute of Forensic Accountants of Pakistan, allowing any person to specialize in forensic accounting, audit, and investigations. The Institute of Certified Management Account of Sri Lanka, CMA, conducted a certificate program on forensic accounting and financial frauds in association with Gujarat Forensic Sciences University, and CS Sri Lanka is conducting a certificate course in forensic accounting. Therefore, this awareness session on forensic audit and investigation standards will definitely be beneficial not only to the members of the ICA India, but for the entire South Asian region. So with those remarks, without taking much of your time, let me thank once again the chairman and the organizing committee for inviting me, and I wish the webinar all success. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, President Sir. It is great you have come and graced the occasion. Thanks, Vice President Sir. It is really very honorable for you to come here, and honor is entirely accorded to us. Thank you so much, sir. Over to Nidhi ji.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for joining us in this webinar and for your words. Now, I would like to introduce the Vice Chairman of DAB, CA Dayanivasa Sharma, sir. CA Dayanivasa Sharma, sir, is qualified in 2005, possesses over 20 years of experience in the field of auditing, accounting, corporate, restructuring, valuation, due diligence, and transaction advisory services, currently designated as Managing Partner of Lakshmi Nivasa and Company Chartered Accountant Firm, and leads a team size of 120 people. He is an information system auditor and certified forensic auditor, having completed diploma and certification course conducted by ICAI respectively. Prior to joining the profession of chartered accountancy,
Madam, Madam, Mr. Dayanivas has not joined, so you can Request
Okay.
Mr. Durgesh. He can come at the end for the concluding remarks.
Okay. Thank you so
Please
much, sir.
introduce
Yeah.
Mr. Durgesh.
Okay, sir. Now, I would like to introduce CA Durgesh Pandey, sir, today's eminent speaker. Sir is pursuing the PhD in Forensic Accounting, National Forensic Sciences University, an institute of national importance by Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India. He is a certified fraud examiner from ACFE USA, and he's MCOM chartered accountant. He's a DISA qualified and a certified FAFP. And he has trained over more than IAS officers, ICLS officer, and the other officers. He has a vast experience in his field, and he's very much keen into his interest. Now, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. A very good evening to everybody, and thank you to Nanda sir, Vice President Safa Jambusaria sir, and Mr. Bandara, the President Safa. We had a very good tone setting by our chairman DAB. You know, we recognize Nanda sir more as chairman DAB, and then we don't follow him more on Safa platform. We follow him more on ICA platform. So for us, he's our own chairman DAB, and he set a very nice tone to the standards. I do remember the forensic standards were released on 31st August. I am very happy and proud to be part of the entire journey. They were released on 31st August by Jambusaria sir. He was traveling that day as well, if I remember, because he was very busy, but still he could spare some time, and then he released the standards. We were all in the virtual age, and the COVID, one of the good things which have, very few good things have come out of COVID, but then one good thing which has come out of this COVID is this digital learning platform, where the boundaries of students have been blurred and erased. Because I distinctly remember when Mr. Bandara, he was the vice president of ICMA. I suppose he still is the vice president of ICMA. I went to Sri Lanka. We had a session for about 30 professionals from Chartered Accountant Sri Lanka, ICMA Sri Lanka, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, someone from Sri Lankan Police also, if I'm not wrong, from Gujarat Forensic Science University, which has now become National Forensic Science University. And madam, I have finished my PhD. You can see my degree here very much in my office. Anyways, it's my bad. You must be having my old biodata. So
sorry, sir. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's absolutely okay. So yes, coming to the subject, I'll be discussing the framework, basic principles, and standards on key concept, and standards of engagement management. So 100, 200 series and the basic principles. These topics will be discussed by me. I have a structured presentation. I'll just share my screen and we can take it forward. I hope my screen is visible to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let us move forward. What we have is the compendium of forensic standards. I understand our sessions today are overview of the standards. So I'll be introducing with the standards, and then I'll also be letting you know how the standards came into existence, what was the purpose. So, this domain of forensic accounting and investigation, which is a very upcoming domain and sunrise sector, this domain is still not regulated in most of the countries. You don't have a dedicated professional services catering to this discipline. Globally, what we had seen before the Institute of Chartered Accountants came up with this set of standards, globally there were 2-3 standards, but then they were at a very nascent stage. So we did have the Canadian standards, and we did have the Australian standards and the American standards. However, ours is the first set of full standards. Ours is the first full set of standards with 23 standards covering the entire gamut of practice. All the standards which I referred, they are barely 2 standards, 3 standards, or 5 standards, which cover one aspect of other of the profession, but ours is a full set of standards. Now, this standard, this document, what we have, it has 23 standards. In these 23 standards, first 3 documents that we have out of those 23, first 3 documents that we have, that is, first is the preface, second is the framework, and third is the basic principles. Now, I'll not be spending a lot of time in the preface, because the preface is mostly on how the standards were set, which both the honorable speakers, Jambusaria sir and Nandaji, both they discussed as to how these standards came into being. As I said earlier also, I was fortunate to be part of the entire standard drafting body. So I was in this since very inception. So I know we did a very extensive consultation and very extensive team. I understand we also have some statistics and numbers where the number of professionals were involved, probably 70, 80. I don't remember exactly how many. That must be with the board DAB. So those were the preface, extensive consultation, and these standards came into being. These standards are still not mandatory in India. These standards are still not mandatory, and they are still in recommendatory phase. A tentative date of 1st April 2023 has been given when these standards will be made mandatory. Of course, the council will be coming with a notification or with a guideline as to whether they'll be mandatory or not. As of now, the date is 1/4/2023. These are recommendatory in nature. The second document which we have in these standards is the framework. The second document that we have in the standards is the framework. Now, when we talk about the framework of these standards is the framework. If you see the framework explains how the standards are laid. So typically the framework says that every standard is divided into 6 parts. The standards are bifurcated into 6 parts. Each standard forms a fixed layout where each standard is divided into 6 parts. First is introduction and the scope. Now here, the standard is introduced as to what is the standard and what is the scope of the standards. In the scope para, due care has been taken to mention the specific exclusions. So wherever a standard puts a statement and the statement is not clear in the mind of the user, that is, wherever there is little bit of ambiguity, it is ensured that the standard clearly depicts that this is what needs to be done and this is what is excluded and it is covered elsewhere. So there will be ample cross references in the standards, if you will see. Okay, say for example, communicating with agencies. There is a standard for communicating with agencies, standard 240. Now it's clearly written that whenever you communicate with agency, if that is the scope, the expert witness services will not be covered by this because there is a specific standard on expert witness or testifying before the agencies. So all the inclusions and the exclusions have been specifically put in the introduction and the scope. Next is the objective. Please understand that this layout is applicable to all the standards. So the next part is the objective. If you read the text of the standard, and mind you, most of these standards are for 2 or 3 pages. Few standards run into 5 pages. None of them run more than 6 pages, if I'm not wrong. So they are very crisp, very small, very precise. These are also called as principle-based standards. Why are these called as principle-based standards? I do have a slide for that, and we'll be discussing what is principle-based standards. So the second portion is objective of the standard. This portion clearly explains as to what is the purpose of the standard, what is the thought process, what does this standard aspires to achieve. Okay. It also explains the essential nature as to what is the essence of the standard. Okay. Next comes the requirement part. Now, this requirement is typically divided into two parts. The first portion is section 3, that is requirement, and the fourth portion is explanatory comments. Both requirement and explanatory comments are connected because the requirement portion, it explains as to how the objectives can be achieved. What is the critical element which is required by the user to achieve the objective as explained in the previous para. Next comes the explanatory comment. In the explanatory comment, certain portions of the requirement which are not clear or which may require elaboration. I would not use the word not clear. Certain portion of the standards which require elaboration, which require detailing, which require annexures, which require examples, those have been given in the explanatory comments. Cross-referencing wheresoever possible is also given in the explanatory comments. Okay. The fifth section is a very interesting section, and it has been included in the standard. This section will help us as and when we'll be having a peer review mechanism for the compliance of these standards. The fifth section is called as documentation of work procedures. Now, what do we mean by documentation of work procedures? We need something to explain and guide. We need something to explain, guide, and confirm that these standards have been complied. So this section in all the standard, it has a list of documents, an indicative list of documents which demonstrate confirmation to the standards. Once we prepare these list of documents, it will help us to demonstrate that these standards have been followed. Please understand, as the honorable speakers, they were telling, these standards will help us standardize the task that we are doing, and this will also help us to fall back upon something. If the assignment or if something in the assignment goes wrong or not per the set process. So these standards are very important, and if we demonstrate that we have followed them diligently, then God forbid, if you as an investigator are put through some scrutiny, you can fall back upon these standards, that these are the set of standards which have been issued by my nodal body and I have followed this. That is why the confirmation of the work procedure, that is documents demonstrating confirmation to work procedure, are important, and these have been very clearly mentioned in all the standards. Please understand, all this is an indicative list, and an exhaustive list can be made and formed depending on the situation or the engagement. Now, as we see, the entire framework says, and it rests on the bed of code of ethics. The entire framework, the entire standards rest on the bed of code of ethics. So the code of ethics which are applicable to the chartered accountants, or let me be specific, issued by the code of ethics issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, they are absolutely mandatory in all the assignments which are forensic in nature. So those standards, those code of ethics are equally applicable to this. Now here we start with definition. The standards have definition. Most of the terms which are contentious, which are regularly used in the engagement. They are defined at appropriate place in the standards. They are also defined under the section of definitions, where we have defined two distinct services. If you'll notice, the name of these set of standards is Forensic Accounting and Investigation Standards. Please understand the practice area here is bifurcated into two parts. One, forensic accounting. Second, investigation. We also have a third area, litigation support, which is explained later when we discuss the nature of engagement standard, FAIS 110. So what do we understand by forensic accounting, and what is forensic and what is investigation? Let me explain these two words, though we also have this under nature of engagement. And one more thing, these standards are specifically for a purpose called as forensic accounting and investigation, and not forensic audit. Please understand, the word accounting is a broad word and it includes the word audit. Accounting is not merely bookkeeping, but audit is a subset of accounting. That is why the word accounting is used, so that it gives a broader perspective of the entire practice, and not simply the word audit. So deliberately the word forensic accounting and investigation is used and audit is not used. One more reason why the word audit is not used, because globally, or in all our countries, in all the South Asian countries, it is seen that public accountants or chartered accountants, by whatever name they are called, their primary job is audits, that is the assurance service. Now the assurance service essentially differs from the forensic service. In the assurance service, we have to give a true and fair view, which is absolutely not the mandate in case of investigation service. So the user, not to confuse the user between the assurance service and the forensic service, another distinction is made by using the word forensic accounting. This is the rationale behind using the word forensic accounting and investigation. As I said, that everything lies on the beds of code of ethics. Let me just tell you, see, this principles, this standard is this standard, this is the on the screen you will be seeing the structure of the standard. This is the current status of the standard. So first we have our overarching documents, which we are discussing. Next we have the 100 series standards. The 100 series standards are the key concepts which are explained for and which are relevant for the entire engagement. So the 100 series standards, they have 4 standards which cover right from the nature of engagement, the other nature of assignment, fraud risk, laws and regulation, and applying hypothesis. The next series we have 200 series, where engagement management is given. Now these standards has everything to do with the engagement. Now the engagement objective, acceptance, appointment letter, work order, using the work of an expert, liaising and engaging with agencies, and communication with all the stakeholders involved, that may be primary stakeholder or the other stakeholder, all the stakeholders involved. This is given in the engagement management. These set of standards covers the engagement. Now we come to as to how, or guidance as to how the standards, how the engagement is to be done, how the assignment is done. That is given in 300 series. This starts right from planning of the assignment, evidence and documentation, conducting specific work procedures, interviews. Interviews are the most crucial part in any investigative assignment. And as our Chairman IT Committee SAFA, he said that there will be dedicated sessions for interviews as well in future. Next comes review and supervision and testifying before competent authority. There are 3 standards which govern the specialized area. These 3 standards which are there on the specialized area, these are applying data analysis, e-discovery, that is evident discovery in digital domain, and loans and borrowings. These 3 standards specifically cater to the specialized area which are primarily seen in most of the engagement. Next, we have reporting result. Reporting result is the outcome of the entire engagement, and at present we have 1 standard in the 500 series. In the 600 series, we have 1 standard which is more for quality control as to how to continuously check and improvise the quality of the engagement. Okay, so this is the 23 standards that we have. Now, these standards are called as principle-based standards. These standards are called as principle-based standards. Why do we call them principle-based standards? Unlike the assurance standards or unlike the accounting standards, these standards don't go into how things should be done. They don't go on how things should be done. They don't go on the procedural aspect, but they give only principle-based guidance. Please understand, for whenever these standards are made mandatory, these standards at minimum should be followed. These standards at minimum should be followed if a member is discharging his attest function for a forensic engagement. Okay. These standards also help both the user and the professional in determining the minimum quality of service or in benchmarking the quality of service that is offered to the user. Okay. Both, there are lots of issues. I don't know about other countries, but I'm sure these are trying times for accountants, and we have seen in most of the countries, we have seen that because of rampant frauds, the heat of the government agencies and the regulatory agencies are building up on everybody in the entire financial sector, including the auditors and the professionals. So this standards will also help, to the government agencies and the regulators in understanding as to what should be their expectation if a set of accounts, if a set of books of accounts are investigated by a forensic professional. Okay, not to say guidance on matters of implementations and related practical issues will be issued in due course by the DAB. Because these are principle-based standards, the how part as to how this should be done, how a task should be done, they will be issued at a later date. Okay. Let me move ahead. So, as I said, these are the overarching document, the preface, the framework, and the basic principles. I've already discussed the preface and the framework. Let me go to the basic principles. Now, if you will see, our set of standards have 10 basic principles. Out of these 10 basic principles, 5 basic principles are guiding, they are guidelines on the attributes to be possessed by the investigator, by the professional. The standards use a uniform word across the uniform word used across the standard is professional. Now, the word used professional and not just accountant is that if someday a person who's a non-accountant and if he does an investigation which is not merely financial in nature, then also he can use these standards as a guidance. So the word professional is used across the standards. Now, if you'll see, the first 5 basic principles are on the attribute part. So if we see the first basic principle, the first basic principle is independence. Okay, the first basic principle is independence. The moment we talk about independence, we should understand that independence is merely not independence in conduct of the assignment, but it also means independence of mind, independent of thought process, independent in action. The professional should not be influenced by anything which hampers or affects his independence. Okay. Next, we have integrity and objectivity. Okay. We have integrity and objectivity. Please understand, I have skipped on the definition of forensic accounting, investigation, and litigation support. This I'll be discussing when we discuss the nature of engagement. Okay. Then we'll be discussing these 3 points. I have not forgotten, but we'll be discussing when we discuss these first standard. Okay. Now, integrity and objectivity. We are discussing integrity and objectivity. The integrity and objectivity are one of the most essential element in this forensic investigation. See, a lot of cases, professionals are being appointed by law enforcement agencies. In lots of cases, professionals are being appointed by law enforcement agencies. In such cases, in fact, we do a lot of work for the law enforcement agencies. So in such cases, integrity and objectivity become altogether more important. The professional should be highly objective in his approach, methodology, and behavior. It should also be ensured, because most of the reports that we issue, they will and they may be contested in a court of law. So it's also important to be as objective as possible and to try to reduce the element of subjectivity to bare minimum. The moment there will be subjective elements in the outcome in the report, the professional will be stuck, and he has to come out and he has to explain as to why he had this subjectivity. So ideally, I do say that it should not be one of the 5 outcomes. It should be the only outcome coming out of an engagement. That is meant by integrity and objectivity. Next comes due professional care. Now, what do we mean by due professional care? Due professional care means that the professional is exercising reasonable care. The professional is exercising reasonable care. He is applying enough mind to ensure that the work is performed in a particular way. Okay. Now, whenever there is a situation where the professional has a feeling that he cannot take due professional care, the professional should refuse the assignment. The professional should refuse the assignment. Due professional care also means that in case of an engagement, if there are other standards, which needs to be complied, the professional at the best should be aware of those standards. If he is not aware, he should engage an expert who can confirm that those other set of technical standards is also applicable and complied in this particular assignment. Next comes confidentiality. Now, confidentiality is of utmost importance in case of a forensic investigation. The information, as we have a mandate in our office and as we discuss everywhere, the information in a forensic engagement is to be shared strictly on need to know basis. The information in a forensic engagement is to be shared strictly on need to know basis. It should be, and also the engagement letter. The engagement letter, this we'll understand while we are drafting the engagement letter, that is FAIS 210 and FAIS 220. When the engagement objectives are decided and when the engagement letter is drawn, then care has to be taken that if there is a requirement of the report being shared with any third person, then that has to be mentioned right when the engagement letter is drawn. Okay, so confidentiality is of utmost importance. Next comes skills and competence. Please understand, our accounting standards or auditing standards, they may not emphasize so much on skill and competence as the forensic investigation standards. The reason why skills and competence play a very important role is because these set of standards are applicable for disputes. These are applicable for disputes. In many cases, these disputes pertain to technical areas of expertise. Like, I'll tell you an example. There is a very popular case which has happened in Gujarat. I am from India and I am from a city called as Ahmedabad. In state of Gujarat, we had a alcohol tragedy, a spurious liquor case where 46 people lost precious life. Now, in such a case where there is an appointment of a forensic professional, the professional has to understand as to how the alcohol became spurious, what was the stock record, what was the financial record. So here the toxicity becomes very important. To understand the toxicity, it becomes very important. Now, in many cases, we as an accountant, we don't possess those skill and competence. So we should have that data bank, we should have those backing, and we should have those competence of engaging experts. We have a dedicated section, FAIS 230, using work of an expert, as to how an expert is to be engaged, what is expected from an expert, and there is a very crucial section validating the work of an expert. Okay, validating the work of an expert. So technical skill and competence should be there. Only then the work can be done. Okay, only then the engagement should be accepted. Next comes contextualization of situation. Contextualization. Please understand, I am spending a little bit of time here because these basic principles are uniform and applicable through all the standards that we'll be discussing further. Okay. So next is contextualization of situation. Now, what is meant by contextualization of situation? The forensic accounting and investigation engagement cannot be conducted in isolation. It's not that one particular incident should be seen in isolation and context should be drawn from that. The entire context of the happening or mishappening has to be looked. Only then an opinion or a fact can be derived from that. A single transaction, you cannot form an opinion or you cannot express a fact merely by checking a single transaction. Both the precedents and the antecedents of the perpetrator or of the transactions are important to understand, to give a statement or to give a report. Okay, this is contextualization of situation. I mean, to understand it more clearly, if you can relate watching a web show where if you start season 2 episode 3, you'll not understand as to what is happening in that particular episode. That is why they have a system of recap. In this recap, they will be giving a brief idea about the entire situation so that you can appreciate what the characters are doing. This is called as contextualization of situation. Next comes primacy of truth. Please understand, predominantly a FAI engagement is finding the truth. So truth is most important element in a FAI engagement. Truth is the most important element in the FAI engagement. Most of the job is a fact-finding exercise where the facts are to be found by the professional. Okay. And the moment the professional feels that he is deviating from the truth, he should pull himself back. And if the professional is put in a situation where he is forced to deviate from the truth, he needs to put his foot down, explain the reason as to why he is resigning, and he should resign from the assignment. Okay. So primacy of truth. Next comes respecting rights and obligation. Now, what is meant by this rights and obligation? See, in most of the forensic engagement, they lead in loss of employment for the employee. Say you are detecting a fraud, and the outcome is that you come to know that so and so person has committed a fraud. The outcome of that would be that he or she would be retrenched from employment. Now, when such a person is retrenched from employment, please understand it is precious human life where we are investigating. So, rights, that is right to privacy, and obligation, that is the obligation towards the person, is very important, and it is important to respect the rights and obligation of the person. In the same thing, the principle of natural justice should also be followed while respecting the rights and obligation. Attempt should be made to listen to the story from the other side. Only then the forensic professional can come to a proper conclusion. Next is separating facts from opinions. Please understand, it is very crucial, because I have noticed that in many engagement, there is a stress put on the professional to express his opinion as to whether there is a fraud, whether someone is guilty, so many things. Now, as professionals, as accountants, we have to remember that our job is not to express opinion and to give an opinion of guilt or innocence. It is for the court to decide that whether the person is guilty or innocent. Our role ends at finding the fact. So this is a fact finding the assignment, and you are supposed to report the facts. Okay, you're supposed to report the facts. So enough care should be taken that opinions don't come in this. At the same time, I would like to go to the biases. Personal biases should also not come in this. You should ensure that you have 4-5 types of biases: confirmation bias, judgment bias. All these biases don't come in this. It may so happen that the professional is engaged for a assignment which has very wide media coverage, very politically hot. So enough care should be taken that the professional is not swayed away in a direction where the media trial is moving. Okay. Last is quality and continuous improvement. Okay. Quality and continuous improvement. Now, this principle clearly says that the professional shall have in place a process of quality control. Now, what will this process of quality control do? It will ensure that the discovery of evidence whatever evidence is discovered, the discovery of evidence is factual and authentic. All the findings are validated, and there is a mechanism where there is continuous improvement in the quality which is followed, continuous improvement in the quality and the processes which are followed by the professional. Okay, so continuous quality improvement. There's also a mechanism in the standards. It is written that an appropriate peer review mechanism shall be devised and implemented by ICAI at a future date to be notified and as applicable. We have peer review in all types of engagement. The same applies to this as well. Okay, so this is about the basic principles. Let us come to our 100 series, standards on 100 series, which we call standards on key concept. Now, in this 100 series standards, we have 4 parts, 4 standards in the 100 series. That is 110, understanding the nature of engagement; 120, understanding the fraud risk; 130, laws and regulations; and applying hypothesis. These 4 standards complete our 100 series. Let us quickly jump to the first one. So a quick question to the tech support. I'll not be available in the end for the questions. So if you have questions, you can put it on the chat box. I'll try to answer that during the course of my discussion. The tech support team, which is looking after this, Nidhi, if you can please coordinate with him that if there are questions, please put that on the chat box. I'll try to answer that during the course of my discussion. Okay, because I'll not be available after my session to answer the questions. Okay, yeah. Let us come to the 110 nature of engagement. Okay, nature of engagement. Okay. Nature of engagement. Now, as I said, the nature of engagement, we have three types of engagement which are covered by the standard. Okay, the first one, what we call as forensic accounting, which is popularly known as forensic accounting. Now, forensic accounting refers to ascertainment of fact and discovery. So typically the word forensic has been taken from the Latin word forensis, meaning acceptable before a forum. And forensic accounting, it refers to ascertainment of the findings, ascertainment of the facts and discovery of the findings which are acceptable in court of law and using the principles of accounting. Okay, using the principles of accounting, that is covered in forensic accounting. Next, we have investigation. Now, what is the difference between forensic accounting and investigation? So, what is investigation? Investigation is evaluation of critical facts which are essential to know in case of a dispute. This is again a evidence discovery exercise. You know, where there are some alleged act of misfeasance, there is some alleged act of theft, there is some alleged act of violation of rights or sexual harassment. All these things are covered under investigation. The third point, which we have litigation support, it means arbitration, mediation, dispute resolution, or providing expert witness. So typically, engagement may be bifurcated into forensic accounting, investigation, or litigation support. Okay, forensic accounting, investigation, or litigation support. Now, please understand that whatever may be the mandate, that shall be clearly understood, and it should be specifically told that this is not an audit. Okay, it should be clearly told that this is not an audit. So the concept of audit should be clearly negated in this assignment, that this is not called as audit, and the report shall not be called as forensic audit. Okay, the report shall not be called as forensic audit. Okay, now wherever, as I said, wherever the mandate requires application of accounting skills, it shall be forensic accounting. Wherever the mandate requires to discover and evaluate evidence for a specific purpose, okay, wherever it requires to discover evidence for a specific purpose, it shall be called as investigation. Okay, but in none of the situation, it shall be called as audit. Okay, now this we have already discussed. Move forward. Yeah. So statutory audit or internal audit, this can be a starting point of forensic investigation. Okay, statutory audit or internal audit can be starting point of a forensic investigation. It may so happen that the external audit has noticed, the statutory auditor has noticed some element of fraud, and he may call for the forensic team to take it forward. Okay, forensic accounting aspires to highlight accounting or legal violation. As I was telling, the difference between forensic accounting and investigation. What can be the clear difference between forensic accounting and investigation? Please understand, whenever the nature of the dispute or the nature of investigation is financial, then forensic accounting shall be, the principles of forensic accounting shall be applicable. Whenever the investigation aspires to examine facts and circumstances to discover the evidence, that is, there is a theft of stock, or a fire has occurred, a fire incident has occurred, and the stock has been burned. There is dispute between the insured and the insurer, where the insured is claiming an amount and the insurer is rejecting the claim or probably accepting the claim at quite reduced amount. In situations like that, it will come to investigation. Okay, this will be covered in investigation. Okay, investigation aspires to examine facts and circumstances to discover the evidence. It revolves around operational or special transaction. Okay, now, as I said, all these standards, they have the beautiful piece, that is the section 5, which is there in the standards. The section 5 says that documentation of work procedure. Section 5 in all the standards is documentation of work procedure. Now, what do we mean by that? It means that following are the set of document. Of course, everything is indicative list only. There's no exhaustive list in the entire standard. We all have indicative list. The reason why these are indicative list is because of the gamut of transactions or gamut of forensic assignment that a professional undertakes. Forensic assignments, the nature of forensic assignments are very varied. We here in our firm, we have a very wide variety of work which we undertake. So that is why you cannot have a specific list, and the list is a floating list which keeps on changing. Only the principles remain common. So documentation of work procedure. What is covered in documentation of work procedure? Correspondence, minutes of meeting, and all communication documents can be used as confirmation to work procedure. So a professional at bare minimum is expected to have all these documents, correspondence, minutes of meeting, and all communication documents, in order to demonstrate that he has confirmed to the work procedure, that is prescribed or that is guided by this particular standard. Okay. Next comes the fraud risk. Okay. Next comes the fraud risk. Now, for any engagement, it is important to assess the fraud risk. In many sessions, I have told that the forensic investigation is an extension. It's an extension of the internal audit function. The moment an internal auditor feels that something is wrong, something is fishy, there is some element of fraud. Okay, there is some element of fraud. The assignment can be turned into a forensic assignment. Okay. Now, fraud risk is an essential part in the investigation. Fraud risk is an essential part in this investigation. Here, the fraud triangle is to be kept in mind. I hope all of you are aware about the fraud triangle. What is the fraud triangle? The fraud triangle says that wherever a occupational fraud happens, there has to be a culmination of three things. That is the pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. Okay, there has to be a culmination of these three things. While assessing the fraud risk, it is important to keep in mind, all the legs of the fraud triangle, because the fraud triangle helps you to determine as to what can be the cause of this particular fraud. So it will be helping you in your investigation. Okay, so what is the pressure to commit this fraud? How the perpetrator got the opportunity to commit this, and how is he rationalizing, how is he justifying his act? Okay, so the fraud triangle is an important piece which needs to be known, and it needs to be mapped by the professional to assess and gauge the fraud risk. Risk is nothing but uncertainty. Okay, fraud risk is the probability of a transaction turning fraud. Okay, now the similar fundas of inherent risk, residual risk, they all apply in a scenario like this as well. Okay, so the professional is required to do a assessment of the high risk and vulnerable areas of the fraud. It is because if he will be doing a fraud risk assessment and he will be finding the high risk and vulnerable areas, only then he can modify his procedures, or he can determine as to where emphasis is to be given in order to come to a conclusion in the shortest possible time. Please understand, in most of the forensic investigation, time is an essence. Because you keep on, the more time you lose, you keep on making the perpetrator more strong, and you give him more time so that he damages, destroys, or makes evidences disappear. Okay, so the first step is, requirement is to undertake a preliminary fraud risk understanding of the area and possess area and processes relevant to the subject matter of the engagement, and to understand the nature and complexity of the engagement, and to assign appropriate skill set. It may so happen, in many cases, we have done a case where we were hired to find the cost. we were hired to find the cost estimate. There was a dispute. It was a government contractor. The contract value was going into hundreds of crore. So the dispute was sorry. The dispute was between the the dispute was between the contractor and a government agency, where the government agency was telling that an amount of X has been spent, and the contractor was claiming that an amount of X plus something has been spent. We were hired to check as to what was the amount that was spent. Now, while drafting the report and while sending the result, while presenting the results, we categorically mentioned that the report which we are giving is based strictly on verification of the financial record and the invoices. We have not visited the premises, and we cannot check or verify the existence, accuracy, or the adequacy of the assets which are mentioned, because we are not competent. So here, appropriate skill set, at least the high value equipment, we need to employ, we need to hire appropriate skill set, so that this risk can be mitigated, and we can be reasonably sure that this portion is actually there, the financial records of which we are verifying. Similarly, a detailed risk assessment helps you in prioritizing the work and identify the fraud indicators. Based on the fraud indicators, one can find the most vulnerable area, and efforts can be put into find the frauds. Okay, this will also help in presenting and reporting the findings when the work is completed. Okay, this will help us in presenting and reporting the findings when the work is completed. Okay, now to one important element in case of frauds is that everything is intentional. It will only be fraud if it is intentional. And there's also statistics. The statistics published by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiner, it says that in 96% of the cases, probably more than 90%, I'll not quote exact 96, more than 90% of the cases, efforts are put in to conceal the fraud. Efforts are put in to conceal the frauds. This is one reason why the existing audit practices, the existing audit processes are insufficient to find fraud, because the audit processes are designed to find mistakes and errors. They are not designed to find specific frauds. If one has thought of it, planned it, and executed it in a very good manner. Okay, so intentional deceit and effort to conceal the fraud makes the job more difficult. Okay, the list of documents which confirm application, which demonstrate confirmation to the standards, is to prepare a document enlisting all the fraud indicators and how these are addressed in the work process. Okay, all the fraud indicators and how these can be addressed in the work process. This shall demonstrate confirmation to the standards. Let us move to the next standard, 130. This is laws and regulation. Now, please understand that unless there is a specific act, unless there is a specific law under which the professional is appointed, unless there is a specific law or specific act under which the professional is appointed, all the appointments are governed by the Contract Act. It is a contractual agreement. Now, if the appointment is undertaken under a specific law or under a specific act, then care should be taken that the appointment is in line with the objective of the particular law and regulations. Okay, the objective of the engagement and the expected outcome and the deliverables should be in sync with those laws and regulations. If I can give you an example in the Indian context, there's something called as transaction audit under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Now, though the word used is transaction audit because that is investigation of specific transaction, loosely many firms use the word forensic audit for that. That is typically a forensic accounting engagement where the professional is responsible for finding PUFE transaction, where P stands for preferential, U stands for undervalued, E stands for extortionate, and F stands for fraudulent. PUFE transaction. Okay. So if the appointment is for a particular law, then provisions of those law have to be followed. Okay. And if the appointment is under a general law, that is, if there is a general appointment, then it should be ensured that a contract is drawn properly and all the essential elements of the contract act are specified. At the same time, the agreement between the stakeholders and the professional should be consistent and in line. So you cannot have an investigation to do so, you cannot have an engagement to do something illegal. Okay, it has to comply to all the general laws and regulation. Now, there are two types of laws also. The laws are also classified in two categories. One is direct impact law and other is engagement specific law. Now, direct impact law, as we call, direct impact law are those laws under which the appointment is made. Okay. Direct impact law, I'm sorry. Direct impact laws are those laws which are integral for the particular engagement. Okay. Direct impact laws are those laws which are integral for the completion of the appointment. Oh, I see. Anand is already here. Anyways, let me quickly wrap up. He told me that he'll be late by a few minutes, so that is why I took the liberty to take few minutes of his session.
No, please, Durgesh bhai, as you wish. I just wanted to listen to you. That's it.
No, thank you so much. I am delighted I have an audience like you. It also makes me more conscious. Anyways, so we were discussing the laws and regulations. I was telling that there are two types of law. One is the direct impact law and other is the engagement specific law. Okay. The direct impact law, these are integral to all parts of the engagement, say the Evidence Act, okay, or the Procedure Code. These are integral to all types of engagement. Whereas engagement specific act, say if you are appointed to investigate a royalty fraud case as to whether proper royalty is being given to the appointee or not. In such a case, the law pertaining to royalty needs to be understood. Okay. If the engagement specific laws are very complex, if they involve a lot of complex process, then it is advisable to use an expert for doing the job. and the expert can be appointed as per in accordance to FAIS 240. Okay, the expert can be appointed in accordance to FAIS 240. Let us move forward. Yeah, this we have already discussed. Yeah, the principle of natural justice, it plays a key role to add authenticity and impartiality to investigation. Please understand, as most of these laws will be in most cases, the report will be contested, the report will be used in court of law. So principle of natural justice should be followed, an opportunity should be given to the person so that he can present his side of the story. Okay. Detailed checklist, chain of custody documents, deviation to specific law documents shall form part of confirmation to work procedures. Okay, this shall form part of confirmation to work procedures. Let me move forward fast because I would like to wrap up in next 15 minutes. I have a lot of content. Let us discuss the concept of hypothesis. See, the concept of hypothesis is an assumed theory. Any investigative assignment, when you start, you have to start with a imaginative statement. You have to start by assuming something, that this may have happened or this may be the cause. Based on this, you create a hypothesis, and this hypothesis is either validated or rejected as the outcome of the assignment. Okay, all the investigation tools and investigation methodologies, they are centered around the hypothesis. It is the hypothesis which determines as to in what direction the investigation will move. Further, the hypothesis created, it should be flexible, it should be evolving, and the investigator should have an open mind so that the hypothesis can be altered depending on the findings which are evolving. Okay. After completion of the investigation, the professional should be in a position to either prove, disprove, or not prove. Please understand, these words are taken directly from the Evidence Act, where we have three concepts: prove, disprove, or not prove. Okay, so the professional should either prove it, he should disprove it, or he may say that he cannot prove it, the evidences are not sufficient. Now, documents demonstrating formulation of the hypothesis, application of the testing procedures, these can all be documents which confirm that the work procedures have been followed. Okay, now the engagement specific standards. I have 5 standards, but I'll complete soon. Okay, as I told, I was thinking I'll be taking 10 minutes of Anand's time, so I'll be taking those 10 minutes and I'll be finishing them. So the first set of standards that we have for the engagement specific standards, it is the engagement objective. Now, what is this standard? The professional has to determine as to what is the objective of the engagement, whether it is a forensic accounting engagement, whether it is an investigation, or whether it is a litigation support. Based on this, he'll be determining the scope, and based on such scope, he would be understanding and creating the documents for the engagement. Okay, the scope which the professionals decide should be in sync with the objective of the engagement. What does the client wants to achieve by conduct of this assignment? Please understand, unlike our traditional audit, the objective at the end is not true and fair view. In some cases, it would be to find out the person who's guilty. In some cases, it would be to quantify As I told, in a case, we are only supposed to find what is the proportion of normal loss. What is the proportion of normal loss? Now, how are we supposed to find normal loss? There are lots of standard, lots of technical guidance, and lots of experts help which we have to take. Okay, so the objective needs to be known first, and everything is to be determined surrounding the objective. The expected outcome is also in line with the objectives as defined in the scope. The objective, it's also important to know that the objective should not be designed to commit a particular outcome. The objective should be neutral, unbiased. Okay, it should not be designed for a particular outcome. Now, on the screen, you will see for a possible objective for forensic accounting, possible objective for investigation services, and possible objective for litigation services. So, financial statement manipulation, fund diversion, asset tracing, money laundering, all these are objective for forensic accounting. Insurance, personal injury, ethical code of conduct, whistleblower, all these are investigation services. And fact witness, expert witness, alternate dispute resolution, these all form part of litigation service. Okay, now where the engagement is undertaken prior to the LEA investigation, due care should be taken to address the ethical consideration. In many cases, it has been seen that companies get investigation done before they expect that a law enforcement agency is going to take coercive action. Please note that ethical consideration should be taken due care. You are not violating any law and you are not becoming a accomplice with the owner of the business. So, terminology like anti-forensics, pre-forensics, please keep in mind that by any nomenclature can be used because it's not prohibited, but the work what you do should not fall in the gray area of being legal or illegal. Okay. Also, an engagement acceptance is to be drawn, which we'll be discussing in the next standard, FAIS 220. Documents demonstrating the appointment is correspondence, minutes of meeting, and other documents. If the objective is altered, then such other document should be retained as confirmation to work procedures. Okay, let us discuss 220, engagement, acceptance, and appointment. Engagement comes with a degree of sensitivity and inherent risk. Now, for any engagement, there are few procedures which needs to be done. Okay, they are preliminary procedure and due diligence. Okay, they are preliminary procedures and due diligence. Now, what is preliminary procedure? What is due diligence? So, if we talk about preliminary procedure, to start a assignment, if the professional is assessing the independence, if he's assessing whether he's competent, if he's assessing whether he has enough skills, all this will come under preliminary procedure. Whereas due diligence will be talking to the key stakeholders, understanding the scope, knowing the limitations. All this will form in the due diligence. So the professional needs to undertake preliminary procedure and getting an understanding about the nature and complexity of the engagement. Due diligence needs to be done to gain an assessment of the inherent risk and accepting the assignment. Now, the stakeholder as to whom the report is to be addressed, who will be the direct stakeholders, who will be the indirect stakeholders, to whom you can share the report and with whom you cannot share the report. All these things needs to be addressed at this stage. A written letter of engagement is strongly recommended. The standard says that a written letter of engagement. It is also noticed that in most of the government agencies, they don't give an engagement letter. So in such cases, appointment letter or work order that forms sufficient document. That forms a sufficient document. Okay. So this is our engagement, acceptance, and appointment. That is why we have used engagement, accepted, and appointment. Okay. Now, documents like detailed engagement letter or appointment letter should be retained to demonstrate confirmation of work procedures. Okay. Moving on to 230, this is using the work of an expert. This is the second last standard which I'll be dealing today. So using the work of an expert, as I said, in most of the cases, we use the work of an expert. I gave two examples today. The first example which I gave, that was for verifying the fixed assets as to whether they are appropriate, adequate, and sufficient, verifying the fixed asset. That is one. The second example which I said, that was regarding the volatility. Say I talked to you about the case which has happened for the spurious liquor. So, for verifying the toxicity, for verifying the volatility in the chemical, for verifying the yield, for verifying the normal loss, you need an expert who can comment on that. So the expert should possess domain expertise and technical knowledge relevant to that particular discipline. Okay. And in case the professional is not competent to opine, he should take the work of an expert. The expert can either be appointed by the appointing authority, or the professional himself can appoint the expert, of course, in consonance and confirmation with the appointing authority. The professional is supposed to evaluate the qualifications and credentials of the expert, and he is supposed to define the scope and the expected deliverables that the expert will be giving. In this standard, there's a very critical aspect as to validating the outcome of the expert. Please understand, it's a very tricky part. At once, we don't have that expertise. That is why we are appointing an expert. At the same time, we have to validate what are his findings. Now, why this is put? This is put that to check a second degree, have a second degree check that the expert is doing a good job or not. So if there are technical standards, then the professional should ensure that those technical standards have been used by the expert. The scope is reasonable. The procedures which has applied and the timeline which has used, that is reasonable. Okay. Now, agreement with the expert, qualification, non-disclosure, technical standards, all these documents have to be kept as a confirmation to compliance with this standard. Please understand, the ultimate responsibility of the expert's work lies on the professional. So either he should retain all the documents, or he should retain all the documents, or he should create a mechanism where the documents are accessible to him on call. Okay, the second last standard, I am sorry, I told that standard is second last, but then this is the second last standard. There are, it goes up to 250. There are 5 standards in this engagement. So this is engaging with law enforcement agencies, engaging with agencies. What is defined as agencies? Agency is law enforcement agency, regulatory bodies, and adjudicating authorities. These come in the definition of agencies. Now, in many cases, the professionals are expected to work closely with the agencies, or the agencies themselves appoint the professional. Now, please understand, if the professional is giving an expert witness, that is categorically excluded from this. It only includes consultations, advisories, and if an employee, if an employee of the stakeholder, if employee of a company is appearing before the agencies. Okay. So here, scope and objective needs to be determined. understanding of the applicable law is crucial. Comply with the basic principle. There also special emphasis is to be put on independence, objectivity, integrity, and confidentiality. Please understand, the moment you deal with agencies, law enforcement agencies, you are privy to a lot of confidential information. Okay. And that should be kept to you. Be aware of the roles and responsibilities in presentation of fact before the agencies. Due professional care should be taken for communication with the agencies. There are certain engagement which are protected. Protected means it is done under the guidance of the agencies. So you have to ensure that whatever you are doing, you can explain that, and you have due skill to do that. Okay. Now, terms of engagement, chain of custody, working paper, communication, paper, all types of communication. This should be retained as to demonstrate confirmation to these standards. Okay, confirmation to these standards. The last one, communication with stakeholders. Please understand, the first one was communication with agencies. This is communication with stakeholders. Now, this standard defines two types of stakeholders. One is primary stakeholders and the second one is other stakeholders. Who is primary stakeholder? Primary stakeholder is one who appoints. Everybody else is other stakeholder. Again, there are two types of matters in this. One is called as essential matter, other is called as significant matter. So your scope, methodology, law, regulation, fees, all this will be essential matter. Essential matter. Okay. And what will be significant matter? If access is prevented to the document, if there arises a conflict of interest, if information is withheld, all these are called as significant matter. Okay. So communication with primary stakeholder, communication with the primary stakeholder is prime responsibility of the professional. Okay. It is prime responsibility of the professional. He has to communicate with the primary stakeholder. Communication to other stakeholder is done to ensure efficient conduct of the assignment. Also, in most of the cases where the professional communicates with other stakeholder, he should take due permission from the other stakeholder. Okay. Communication should be in accordance with laid down and predefined pre-agreed protocol. So due care should be taken that in the engagement objective or in the engagement letter, okay, communication protocol should also be mentioned that this is how we'll be communicating. Communication with other stakeholders should also be predefined and duly included in the process. That is, it should be said that whenever we communicate to anybody outside, a copy of that will be sent to your office. Okay. The communication should be clear, direct, independent, objective, and effective. Refrain from writing long letters. It should be to the point. If you ask general questions, you will get general answers. Please ask specific questions to get specific answers. As I said, the form and content of matter should be communicated, and the time frame of communication is based on the best judgment of the professional. So certain matters, the important matters would be covered as essential matters. Where appropriate, the professional shall communicate for significant matters. Please understand that communication with media or public should be strictly avoided. The information should be shared on need to know basis. Demonstration of legal requirement should be, legal requirement, chain of custody, all these documents will help in demonstrating compliance to these standards. On your screen, you can see what are essential matters, what are significant matters, but then we have already discussed this. Okay. I understand that will be all from my side. I have completed my section. My contact details are on the screen if in case you want to contact me. I'm very
Thank-
sorry to Anand Bhai to take his 15 minutes.
Suresh bhai, no, it's not at all. Actually, thanks to you, I know some of the things which I don't have to cover it also. You have explained it very well because you are talking about engagement management, and I'll be talking about engagement. Conducting the engagement. So
Yes.
it's very much in flow. So
Yeah,
thanks a lot for that.
it's a flow from here to there. Anyways,
Yeah.
thank you so
Thank you.
much. Over to Nidhi ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir, for the nice deliberation. Now, sir, shall we take the question answers?
Yes, please. You can take my question answers because I leave. I told that I am already not. I'll already not be welcomed home. So please don't put me in more pain. I'll
Sir,
quickly answer the questions.
It's
okay, okay.
Monday evening, I think.
So one of the CS put that kindly provide exhaustive input on various forensic accounting techniques. The need for FAIS, is it mandatory for the professional practicing CA?
See, as I told, as of now, these standards are not mandatory. The council has given a date of 1st April 2023 to be made it mandatory. But of course, that date will come when it will come. If the members are not ready, I really don't know whether the council will make it mandatory or not. But as of now, the date when it is mandatory is 1/4/2023. Again, anything which is issued by the council of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, that is binding on its members. So it may not be mandatory on anybody who's not a chartered accountant, but it will be mandatory for everybody who's a chartered accountant.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, and the exhaustive technique, what he said, I understand. I cannot do justice in 3 days, leave alone 3 hours.
Yeah. I know, sir. I know.
Okay,
Still,
he
sir,
can
you
be
have
in touch
given.
with me to, yeah, he can be in touch with me. Probably I can give him a few glimpses.
Yeah, sir. Yeah. Since the another one in the last one is, will there be a new IAS for forensic accounting and investigation? Please say something.
IAS as in?
Will there be a new IAS? I think IAS is Indian Accounting Standard for forensic accounting and investigation.
Frankly, I am. There are two parts of this question. One, I'm not very clear what the question, what the person wants to ask. Second, if it is regarding the Indian accounting standards, my knowledge of the accounting standards is very limited. My area of practice is exclusively into forensics, and I don't think an accounting standard can bind a forensic engagement, because the purpose there is to go into the depth of the transaction. Anand bhai, anything if you would like to add?
No, I completely agree with you. That's the reason when it was a question on accounting standard, I think that is something which is a little different, parameter or the paradigm itself. So I think the question is not very clear. I agree with you.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your giving the precious time.
Thank
Now, yeah. Now I welcome Anand Jangir, sir. Introducing him, he's a passionate and for technical based disruption in audit and finance domain. Anand sir is professionally a chartered accountant and a certified information system auditor. He's managing partner at AJA, an organization with focus in the area of forensic audit, IS audit, fraud analytics, and blockchain for internal audit function. Prior to Goldman Sachs, he was with the ES Consulting Group at Infosys Technologies Limited. He has been involved in IT audit for many international projects at USA, UK, Japan, China, etc. His other professional interest is visiting faculty for IIM Bangalore, teaching IS audit and fraud analytics, speaker at North America CACS and Euro CACS of ISACA, visiting faculty at ISACA, ICAI, and Wellinger Institute of Management. Now, I would like to invite Jangir sir to give his speech. Welcome,
Nidhi,
sir.
ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. And I think, first of all, I should, all our viewers who are actually attending the session on a Friday evening, it's a
Okay.
very interesting thing to have all of you out there. And I will not have much ado. I'll just directly jump into the deliberation which is there. So, our good friend Durgesh Bhai has already given you a kind of a overview of the standard, which is the 100 series and the 200 series. And I'll be actually deliberating on the 300, 400, and 500 as well as the 600 series. But the main important thing which we need to understand is how they have been divided out there. So as we all understand, there is a kind of this 300 series is actually a executing assignment series, which is like how do we execute the assignments. So friends, as this topic of the discussion was an overview of FAI, because there have been a lot of people who work extensively, and it's like a pretty vast area of practice in itself. And there are a lot of thoughts behind each of the words which has been defined and other things. So I will try to do justice in the next 1 hour, which I have, to take you through all these points on the 300, 400, and 500 series, so that we actually do understand the intention of institute in terms of coming out with the standards. And as the 300 series is just directly coming after the 200 series, where you are doing, execution management to executing assignment, which is like doing the task which has been planned for. So there are a lot of things which are going to be common between what Durgesh Bhai said and which I'll be talking about. So I'll actually try to skip on that and try to focus on the crux of the matter, because as a fellow professional, you will agree to one point that it's very important that we do understand the thought process behind coming out with the standards, and in each of the areas, what are the key things which we need to do. So let's start with the first FAIS 310, which is on planning the assignment. Now, when we are talking about planning the assignment, friends, the idea behind this is that the responsibility of the professional when you're planning the assignment, what has to be done, how do you understand the objective of the assignment? And we all know, and I'm sure from the talk I was listening to the Durgesh, you would understand that this nature of forensic engagements are not the same every time. It is going to be different depending on the kind of engagement which we plan. So you need to develop a strategy on the execution and achievement of the objective of the assignment. And that is the key things which we go into this when we are planning the assignment. Now, there are some important points which I want to actually discuss with all of you, and I'm highlighting it up. The concept is they are trying to talk about two things here in this one. The first one is engagement, and the second term is actually assignment. And that's something which becomes very important to understand. Engagement is an overall contractual mandate which a professional and his appointing stakeholders, stipulate. So we have scope of work and everything which is talks about that. But this engagement can be divided into multiple sub areas. Like, for example, if I'm actually doing an engagement of uh, forensic engagement where I'm trying to support to figure it out the misuse of the fund, there can be an assignment which can be there, which is part of the specific thing, which can be covering different locations, different, let's say technical aspect on digital forensic or anything as such. So that would be coming under the term of assignment. So that key difference which we should understand is there is an engagement, which is an overall assignment, and then we have the assignment itself, which is, engagement is consists of multiple assignment out here. So here we need to also know that some of the key elements which are there is to know the nature and the subject matter, like what are the location which has to be covered, what are the functions, and whether this is kind of activities has to be dealt with. Also, we need to understand in clear term the risk factors, the limiting conditions, and what we have already talked about in case of, as we were discussing, that okay, these are the something which we need to plan for, these are the things which we need to understand and evaluate whether you have skill, resources, and timelines for doing that. And when we are doing the FAIS, the planning the assignment, the documentation part is very important, that we know what are the kind of thing we know. And because of the dynamic nature of work which we have in forensic engagement, the information you are gathering, how we are trying to do all the communication with all the key stakeholders, what are the resource requirement you may have it, and how much available resources you have, timeline, everything has to be looked into that. And a key thing which we need to know is the requirement from this standard is that we follow a proper laid down process and document all the outcomes. Hypothesis is something which is already discussed by the great five. So you need to plan the things, from a getting the knowledge of the relevant business, the risk consideration, the work method which you are going to use it up, and how you're going to communicate with the stakeholders also on need to know basis, and to have make sure that the complete engagement is done in a proper manner. So all that things will be coming as part of the first standard, which is FAS 310, which is nothing but planning the engagement. And it's a very standard one, which we all know. FAS 320 on the other side talks about evidences and documentation. Now, here, one of the key things which we need to understand very clearly, friends, is knowing how the stakeholders who are doing it, because anyway, forensic engagement is something which is going to be dealt with in the court of law. So we need to discover the appropriate evidences, maintain sufficient documentation which we are conducting there, and ensuring that all these things are taken care of. So the responsibility of the professional, which is in case we as chartered accountant will be there to make sure that we discover appropriate and reliable evidences. And this term appropriate and reliable becomes very, very important out here. I'm just trying to underline some of the points just to explain the point of view, because there is a term called appropriate and reliable evidences, and that has been defined in the standard, which try to bring it out that how do we sure about that this is something which we want to follow. And also, this applies on the terms of all of the things that we say is what is an evidence and what are the terms. So evidence is, per se, out here, what we talk about is nothing but written information, which is written or oral, or which is, can be taken in electronic form, and which is relied by the professional to arrive at a conclusion on your hypothesis which you are working on, and ensuring that it is something which can is suitable for the court of law. We can actually do it. So as Durgesh Pai was telling it, Indian Evidence Act is something which has been actually taken as a base when we were actually discussing all of the thing out there, and the reliability of the source of the information. So we all know fundamentally, if I'm actually getting any evidences from outside or inside the organization, I will always prefer the outside one. So there are some of the points which are there, and then digital documentation, because we have a standard 420 which is on digital domain, and I'll be discussing with that. And today we have so much of data which is there on the digital domain, which can be actually used up there. So the requirement is more from a perspective of whether we're getting from the reliable sources, whether this is relevant and sufficient documentation is maintained for that. And when we say documentation, it's actually all about the aggregate of all the evidences which are discovered along with the written, record of procedures, conclusion. So if I have to just put up very clearly, something like chain of custody, that would be something which is coming under the purview of documentation, so that we have got the evidences. But let's say if I taken a digital evidences, whether I have followed the proper chain of custody, have I documented everything and all the things, and that has to be put into place. So this standard is more focusing from the perspective of how we deal with the evidences and documentation, and that becomes clearly out there. Also, we need to, ensure one of the things is that if you have evidence which is taken from multiple sources, so it should be appropriate to achieve the objective of the engagement for what you are trying to do that with. And when we talk about this whole concept of, the reliable evidences, it depends on the source, as I told you, where it is come from. And even oral evidences, if it is there in the inquiry on anything you are taking it up, it has to be, put into a written document and taken it up. So that is something which we have tried to put it up in FAIS 320 to ensure it up that evidences and documentation is properly maintained. Now, FAIS 330, friends, talks about conducting the work procedures. Now, when we talk about the work procedures, this is nothing but the different kind of work procedures which are required to conduct in our FAI assignments. So that is to ensure it up that, dealing with data analytics, maybe digital forensic, maybe, a kind of approach like benefit law, or any of the things which we can think of. So we need to have the objective very clearly set up that we need to develop a planned work procedure to achieve the assignment which is there. And anything which is done, it has to be properly help to prove, disapprove, or not prove hypothesis which is formulated. And that exactly what Durgesh was talking about. And most important thing which we need to keep in mind when we are conducting this work procedure is that there should be a proper documentation of the work procedure. There is a kind of a methodology which you'll also see when we talk about 410 on the data analytics side. That is reproducibility, producibility, which is nothing but if someone else does the same work procedure, does he get the same kind of results or not? So that something also comes into picture. So if I have to put it up the flow in a very, very simple term, I'm just trying to put it up a simple approach out here. It will be something like you develop a work procedure where you put the preliminary analysis of that, you make a detailed plan of that. You consider all the fraud indicators which you have talked about that in phase one out here, and then you test your hypothesis to either you know discover evidences to prove or disapprove that hypothesis, And based on that, in case, and that's what happens in any nature of FAI engagement, where there are a lot of dynamic activity which comes into picture. So you may have to change the plan and have it done in a very different. So this is a kind of a simple, I would say, approach which you can actually, see when we are talking about 330, which is conducting the work procedures. Friends, here I want to talk about one very interesting thing, which a lot of people have actually been talking about. That is FAS 340. And FAS 340, if you are all aware of, it talks about uh, when we are doing and conducting an interview. And earlier we used to have a lot of term between interview, interrogation, and all things. And all the experts who have come together, they have actually thought of one of the very clear things that when we are talking about conducting interview, we need to actually document the whole point of what this interview is all about. So conducting interview, it becomes very important that the professional who is conducting or engaging with individual to, the end objective is to elicit some information, directly or indirectly, pertaining to the assignment which is there. It should be something which is related to that. And seeking this evidences is information is from a perspective of corroborating more evidences and recording the statement, which can be even admission of the concerned admission, personal who has done the any kind of wrongdoing or anything such. Now, key thing which happens here is that interviews should not be something which should be taken very lightly. There is a conduct which has to be done in a proper preparation has to be done for that, the planning at that, and there is a kind of a certain essential step to have it at that. It goes without saying that confidentiality and integrity has to be maintained. That whatever we are talking about, that has to be properly documented, and a declaration also, in case which we are required it up to then, we can actually do it. So all these things has to be kept into mind when we are talking about this. So there is a preparation and planning part where you're preparing all the documented evidences. So you prepare your questionnaire. It's something which we call it a set of questionnaire, which will be going for that. And based on the response of the interview, if there is a kind of a flow chart that says if this is the answer, this is the path I'm going to take, or if this is the answers, this is how we are going to take. So there are multiple ways, the methods which are there, where you can put the list, the key themes of the hypothesis. You can actually see the whether the information being provided is relevant or not. And it goes without saying, checking out on the objectivity, expertise of the person who's you are interviewing, and whether that makes sense to keep that point going. And the key thing which we need to keep in mind is there should not be any duress. So, which means without any kind of inducement, threat, or promise, this interview has to be committed. Taking into account the some of the key things on the confidentiality, other things that goes without saying, and taking care of them. Now, this is something which FIS 340 actually talks about here. Now, FAS 350 is all about what we call as the review and supervision, friends. And review and supervision is about the engagement which you are doing. Now, the idea is the work of a team. If any assignment which we go for, it's actually going to be a very diverse team which is going to work on that with a different set of objectives because it's all defined, assignment. So how do we do a proper work procedures are performed, whether they are efficiently and effectively being done? And the whole process of discovering the evidences, the process of making sure they are reliable, making, the project status is reviewed, so it's somewhere also connect with the quality standards. We'll be discussing about that. But the main idea which comes into thing is there should be a proper, supervision which has to be done. And there is also connection with FAS 310 on the planning side, because based on that, many time what happens is your work paper, your whole plan may change depending on the findings which has happened. So at that point of time, we have to also see whether you have in change of circumstances, we have to reassess the adequacy of the supervision, whether we require different people to supervise, whether the expertise which is required is different, or trying to track the whole assignment, budgets, and other things which is coming to that. So somewhere this FAS 350, it is related to the quality perspective, but more than quality, it actually makes sure that the work has been reviewed. So the person who is actually going to test this report or basically present this report knows what we are trying to do it, and all the different points of views has been taken. Friends, the next one is FAS 360, the last of the, on the executing assignment. Here, we talk about testifying before a competent authority. Now, this is a very interesting standard because of few reasons out there. Why? Because you need to understand the scope out there. Now, the concept of competent authority is, is someone who can, it can be court, it can be someone who is a quasi judicial body. So whenever a competent authority calls a professional, to function as a fact witness in a proceedings, or you are providing a service to your client and on a based on agreed upon thing, and then in this case, what happens is, because of the legal nature of the work, you are actually, though you're providing the services to your client, you may be actually you have your responsibility towards complete authority, and that's something which we need to know into that. So as a testifying professional, you require to have the information evidences which you're going to provide. You have to know about that. And the key requirement which we have to know is the conflict of interest should not be there. Whenever we are doing it, it has to be taken it from a perspective of what we call it as, you are always responsible to what we call is the competent authority in the world. So there are some of the basic principles which we have to know. And what are the thing is that intimate if there is any conflict of interest beforehand to the client and competent authority in case it is there. And there is the compensation shall not be contingent about outcome. That is something which already in the basic principles, Durgesh Bhai has talked about that. We talked about this concept of fact witness, which is nothing but trying to bring it up to point out there. And it did not amount to advocacy. That is something which has been talked about. So these are some of the key points which we need to know when we are testifying before a conference. So this is all of them. What we are talking about are the executing standard. Now we go to something very interesting when I talk about, which is the special standards which are there. FAS 410, 420, and 430. And 410 starts with applying the data analysis. Now, applying the data analysis part is something where we talk about, because data analysis is something which is part of every engagement. And today, when we are doing any forensic engagement, the key thing which we need to know about, what are the DA techniques we are going to apply it up, and what are the work procedure. It becomes a part of the work procedure which is there. And any of these things, data analytics part which is there, we need to ensure it up that it improves the probability of the evidence discovery which is there. We have to have intelligence inherent into the DA techniques, which means you are not going to use the same kind of DA techniques again and again. It will all depend from time to time speed. Use of similar approaches, making sure that you are able to identify the fraud indicators, which in other words, we use it as red flags. Confidence about the reliability of reserve which you have derived from that. Now that becomes very important, that whenever we are trying to do any of the things, do we know that this same dynamic process can be reproduced again and same result will come out. So for that, there are some documentation which is there, like the DAP, which is nothing but the data analysis plans. And that becomes a very critical thing, that what is the data analysis? It is more like a blueprint, what we call it up, of what is going to the input, what is going to the processing we are going to do it, what are the, is it like a CDA, we call it as exploratory data analytics, or is it going to be a CDA, a confirmatory data analytics? There are also pre-processing of that, and something I'm sure some of you who have worked on data analytics side knows about feature enriching. So there can be feature enriching, which can be there. But here, some of the key things which still have to keep in mind is the data integrity part, the data preparation part, and whether this can be admissible in the court of law, the data which you are trying to talk about that. And the whole process has to be, done from a perspective of, as I was telling you, a very important concept we call it our friends, is the test of reproducibility and reporting the result in effective form. So this test of reproducibility means anyone else who does the same step as what you have done should be able to get the same result as you have got it. Now, this becomes very interesting in some time when you're doing some statistical model, like if variables changes and all things, that you're machine learning. So you have to keep in mind that all these things has to be properly taken care of. And last but not least, one of the key things which goes is data preservation. It means whatever data you have used in this analysis has to be preserved for future parts. Yeah. So the key things, as I told you, key takeaway in FS 410 is data analytics plans has to be there, because that's a kind of a key document, your blueprint which you are trying to do that. The preparation of data, sanitizations, and validation has to be properly taken care of. The analysis and reporting has to give insight to the professionals in terms of the case which they are handling out there, and the preservation of data, so that after the DXS is done, you can know that this is something which we have talked. Friends, due to your paucity of time, I'll be moving to the next standard, and I won't have 15 minutes for question answers also in between. So the next one is FAIS 420. And this is a very interesting standard because there's a lot of debate when we discuss about that. And as you know, Durga Pai was telling you in the beginning also, right now, this is just a standard. We are going to get, a lot of, I would say, exposure graph and other things that are going to come out of that. And a lot more, I would say, annexes which will be going to be added to that because there is a requirement to explain each of the term. Even if I have to just explain the term digital domain itself, there has been a lot of discussion and debate on that. So FIS 420 talks about, if I have to just say in a plain vanilla way, it talks about on digital forensic, but we try to bring it up that evidence discovery which happens in the digital domain, everything is getting covered in FIS 420. Now, FIS 420, as the name suggests, it is applicable to every assignment which are on the, wherever we are trying to use digital evidence to complete the work procedure in the digital domain. Now, here we need to also understand that in the digital domain, the things are very, very, what I call it up, they are dynamic and they're volatile. Your discovery, which you are going to do, that it is in a very, volatile environment. So that is the reason we need to make sure that we have some relevance technical standards and legal requirement has to be followed under the IT Act and other areas which is there. And also the your discovery and gathering of evidence which you are trying to do it up, it should be done by the person who has requisite skills. We have seen many of the cases where the defense or the prosecution will always says, okay, this is the evidences we are trying to do it. Who captured these evidences? On what basis we are trying to do it? And if you don't have the skills and to prove that, okay, this is a person who is actually certified to do this kind of work, there can be another issue which has to come into picture. Now, one of the key things which again comes is chain of custody, which becomes important that how all the information and that evidence has been gathered. And that becomes another point which we need to look at. Some of the key things which we should know in area of FIS 420 is what we call it as the concept of digital domain. Now, whenever we are saying digital domain, it's nothing but the electronic environment where all digital evidences are present. So that is how the definition of digital domain comes into picture. The term digital evidences is nothing but of data or information which is acquired, stored, and accessed and examined and transferred and used in an electronic form. So we need to comply with the proper law of the land as well as the chain of custody in terms of making sure that this evidence is admissible in the court of law. And finally, the e-discovery part where you try to, the process of how we have captured this information and brought it up. We need to look. Next, friends, we go to one of the specialized standard which is there on loans or on borrowing. And here, the whole idea comes up in terms of, how we are dealing with loan and borrowings which are there. So the key things which comes into picture here is the nature of, if any of the things which is there, uh, misuse of the funds, or we call it the violations. We gather the evidences in terms of the availment or utilization of fund is not as per the way or the term of the contract which is there. Now, here they have tried to cover in this standard a key point on some of the important areas because most of the insolvency cases which are there, we have been seeing the resolution professional or lending bank or investigative agencies always try to go for this area. So it has actually more of a specialized, standard which has come for that. So one of the key things which is there is the area which is, part of the thing has to be clearly mentioned as part of your execution. And also one of the key thing is that your work procedure which are there, if that has some asset tracing, when we are talking about asset tracing, it is trying to trace the whole thing up. It has to be siphoning or diversion of fund. It has to be clearly called out, and based on that, only your work procedures would be taken care of. And a proper, I would say, documentation on the relationship of the lender borrower in the way of, with how they have been actually defined, what are the agreement types, what are the dispute which is there, and making sure that all these things has to be properly documented. And here we need to also ensure it up that the loan which has been extended or obtained to inappropriate or unethical means is not in conformity with some process. So how the loan disbursement happens. So it's the whole life cycle of the loan has to be looked into that. Whether the asset offers are not owned, so what has been actually given as a security, it doesn't even exist or in the knowledge of the thing, or fund was not utilized as the contractual terms. So think of a situation where a term loan has been used as a working capital loan, and there are false statements submitted for fund utilizations or all the things. So these are some of the examples which are found. And the most important thing which we call about here is the asset tracing, which is nothing but finding out the trail of money. You follow the money, you get where the whole issue has happened. And the tracing of the movement of fund to making sure that we reach the ultimate utilizations and ensure that everything is being taken care of. So since the 400 series, as we see, are all of that, what we call it as the specialized section of 410, 420, and 430. Then we come to the FAI's 510. There can be some engagement which doesn't ask for that, but by default, it is a part and parcel of every engagement. Then, so you issue a final report of that, which will convey all the relevant facts, evidences, applicable assumptions, limitations, depending on how you come to that. But the key things which we need to know as part of this reporting requirement is it should be easy to understand and interpret. That is something which is taken for granted. Many times there are so much of confusion is created. It become more worse than what we can actually think of out there. So that becomes another key thing. And it has to be issued within a reasonable time frame. It has to have some key element in terms of the recipient to understand the purpose of the engagement, what is the work performed by the professional, any limitation, any assumptions or disclaimer has to be clearly called out. So these things are basic hygiene factor, which is expected in that whole thing. And also, it should not provide any opinion because that's something which already the guest would have talked in the beginning. Forensic accounting engagement or investigation engagement are not an audit engagement. That's the difference which has been called out there. So that becomes another important point which you need to know. Here, one of the important documentation we should know is there can be a kind of interim report, there can be final report, draft report. All these things has to be properly documented and set out there because even there have been cases where draft report for discussion was changed later and there is no proper change log maintained and it became a kind of a point of contention that okay, this is how it has been changed or all that thing. So that area covers what we call it as your reporting of the results, which is being managed. And that is something which we need to know when we are talking about the reporting results trends out here. Further, when we are talking about the reporting results, one of the key things which we need to also understand is the form and the content of the report. So when I say form and content of the report, we have to give the complete overview of the object. This is like an explanation. It's not like, complete, I would say, the points which is there, but just a kind of examples to just understand it. The fact that the assignment has been conducted in account in this affairs, we have to mention it up there. The executive summary of the results of how the whole area has been, worked into. And if you have a use of a expert, as we were just discussing about that, Dijesh has talked about use of expert. We have to make reference on that this is the expert who was used, and this expert was someone who was actually trying to, given a opinion which has been reviewed by the final, the person who's signing the report. Assumptions or limitation of the engagement. So there can be some assumptions or limitations. Let's say, for example, you were not allowed to visit some location or those locations were out of reach due to multiple reasons or anything. And any conclusion which is drawn based on that, assessment undertaken. So all these things has to be a part of it. So there's a kind of a sample form and content of the report, which we can actually think of being part of the complete cycle, which we need to look. Uh, Coming to the last point, friends, which is very interesting, is FAI 610, where we focus more on the quality control. And as the name suggests, quality control is something which is a all-encompassing part. It is there in everywhere. So acceptable quality of the work performed is something which we take it for granted, and that has to be worked without that. But we need to justify to ensure, as part of this objective of this standard, is that we have a quality control requirement is in place and it's well understood. We know that. And the work which is performed by the professional and their staff follows a systematic and a disciplined approach in terms of quality control stuff. Because this is going to be an overall part of the thing. And we have to have a quality control system, a QCS, which is designed and specify the quality control requirement and how this requirement are met during all stage of assignment. When I say all stage of assignment, there are multiple stages. We'll be seeing it in the next slide. But all the stage of assignment, how we are trying to take care of that. What are the way we are managing it out? All this, thing. And it is also important that it is communicated to all the staff members. So the quality control system, which is there, and it is to be known to the experts who are working on that, the team member who are working on that, so that everyone can actually align themselves with that thing. And on time to time, this has to be also vetted. That whether the quality control standards are being followed, is working fine. Any changes to that has to be done because businesses are dynamic, and that has to be looked into from a perspective of how the engagement are being worked out. So there should be a proper documentations on the side of what we call it as your policies and procedures, which are in the form of quality control system and quality control review manual, which has to be disseminated to all the people in the organization. So 610 is more focusing on the quality. I know it sometimes becomes subjective, but the idea behind here is that before accepting the assignment, the independence of the professional, whatever we have seen in our environment, all our basic, statement of the so skills and competency of the professional who's taking of the work, appropriateness of the scope and objective of the thing. It should not be something which is against the law. So I need to see those parts before accepting the engagement. During the engagement, I need to focus on the work performed, which are there, like how the hypothesis has been framed and how it's been confirmed to work on that. What are the work procedures which I'm following it up? Is there a proper supervision and review of all the work performed on that? And the quality of evidence which is discovered, can it be going in the court of post completion of assignment things? We need to also see that there is a proper independent review. There can be a kind of a quality control team which can actually review all the things, and report ratios can be taken care. And post completion of assignment, we have to have a independent review of all the samples of assignment, and if possible the peer review of type of mechanisms can be put into that, so that there is a overall independence which can be brought up in the whole quality control review system. So this is something which FAI 610, which deals with quality controls, talks about. So just to summarize things, what we have discussed here, we started from the first 300 series, and that was more on executing assignments. So 310 is all about planning the assignments, where we talk about how a complete planning has been taken care of based on the execution management, and whether the whole difference between this terminology of engagement and assignment has to be clearly called out. Second, we talked about on 310, which is evidences and documentation, and we talk about what the differentiating factor between evidence, which is nothing but information which can be written or oral or electronic form, which is used by the professional to arrive on the report, is based. And the second one is on the documentation, which is nothing but the overall supportings and other things which actually help you to make sense from that evidences. And in the whole process, how do we present it in the court of law? What are the key things what is the whole term of, in our engagement, that terms of appropriate evidences and reliable evidences. That was something which we discussed in FAS 320. Friends, then we went to FAS 330, which is, conducting your work procedures which are there. And FAS 330 was more dealing on the different work procedures which we conduct as part of the engagement. It also talks about, how do we evaluate that you're deploying relevant tools and techniques and all the process to discover evidences and perform your work, which can be on data analytics, digital forensic, you name it, any of the area out there. And after 330, we talked about FAS 340, which is more on conducting interview. And we understood the difference between how interview has to be conducted, what are the way effective planning has to be done, how it has to be documented, what all evidences which you need to capture out there, and how this statement may be signed and taken in the court of law. The methods and preparation planning and the confidentiality has to be maintained in conducting an interview. So that was something which we covered in FAS 340. FAS 350, as I just to do a recap, was more on review and supervision. And that is something which is very important. As I told you, FAS 350 is directly related with our quality control standard also, because that is something which has been a key requirement, which a professional is required to have in a diverse team, how they are doing, the documentation, the review of the work done, proper supervisions, and other thing has to be done. And then we went to the concept of 360, which is testifying before a competent authority, and we talked about what a professors can do or cannot do, what are the way they have to deal with that, and what will be the deliverables in this kind of report which has to be do with that, and how it is stay independent in this case of that thing, and in case of any kind of conflict, how it has to be properly commented. And one of the key things which I wanted to tell you, and I've told you that during the discussion also, is that whenever there is a conflict in this under this standard, the testifying professional's duty or paramount duty is towards the competent authority and not towards the client. And that is something which is very important, which we need to be aware of. That is a kind of key ask which is there in FAS 360. Then we moved into the specialized standards, which are FAS 410, which was on applying the data analysis guys. And there we talked about the concept of data analysis plan, how do you do data preparation, data analysis procedures, preservation of data, and most importantly, the test of reproducibility, which is nothing but anyone who does the same test again with the same set of data should be able to get the same result. And that becomes a critical factor in the success of applying data analysis in part of the thing. Then we talked about 420, where we talk about evidence in the discovery of evidence in the digital domain, and the whole definition of digital domain. How do you maintain the chain of custody? What are the key things which is there? How this evidences is gathered, and how do we comply with the national laws, international laws? And during the time of doing gathering this information, also, what are the key asks which we need to know, and how we have to deal with that? So the interesting thing which I would request you to go back is, read in the bare standard, the concept of digital domain and digital evidences and the whole process of e-discovery. So these are some of the key, definitions which have been given and explained out very clearly in FIS 420. And then we mentioned about FIS 430 or loans and borrowing. And here we talk about more from a perspective, specialized nature of the thing, where misuse of fund, any of the thing, which is, a dispute which arises between lenders and a kind of a loan given. How do we trace the asset tracing in terms of all the trail of money, how what was offered, how it has been dealt with that. We talked about that. Then came friends FAS 510, which is more covering on the reporting results. And in reporting results, we talked about the issue of the written report, because issue of formal report is a part and parcel of all FA engagement, unless it is explicitly not required. So it has to be called out very, very clearly in SLW. There's no report will be issued or anything as such. With apart from that, by default, it is actually seen that it will be required, and that is the part and parcel of all the things. And this becomes an important point which we need to look into from perspective of reports. And in the reports also, we have to see how the documentation is maintained in terms of all the draft info reports and final report which has been communicated, and also ensuring it up that what goes in a report. So one of the key things, as I was telling you, is to know that what is the work done section, the purpose of the engagement. It has to be all properly documented. What was the work done? What is the work performed out there? Any limitations which are there, which you couldn't figure it out, and anything which is, your facts and evidence discovered, even if it is you're not taking into account due to some other points which are there, we have to document all the findings and all the tasks which has been done out there. And that comes in after FAS 510. And the last but not least, friends, we talked about FAS 610, where we actually focused on the quality control concept. And here we talked about the QCR and QCS, so nothing but quality control requirement and quality control, review and quality control system, which ensure that, in the engagement which we are doing, which is before accepting an assignment, what are the things we do need to do? During the execution of assignment, what are the things we do? Pre-completion of assignment, before the thing, what are the independent review we do? And in post-completion of the assignment, if we can actually have the peer-reviewed document which can be presented. So all these things are something which we talked about. So friends, I know it was an overview, and because of the paucity of time, I just tried to take it up because looking I was has taken a little more time than what I was actually expecting. But nevertheless, in case you have any more questions, you can actually reach out to me, and I would be more than happy to take any questions now in terms of any query you may have on any of the standard which are there on the 300 series, on the 400 series, on the 500 and 600 series which are there. I would just like to say one very important thing here, friends, which I think a lot of us we need to understand, and every one of you would agree. These standards have come as a culmination of an effort of a lot of people who have put their thoughts and ideas into that. When we actually try to implement them, you will have many more interesting findings which is going to be there, and there are going to be, I would say, a little more analysis on this one, or more points which will be coming on this, which we can actually look into in terms of how we are dealing with that. What are the key things which we should be aware of? And those are the things which we have to do. Especially, I would say you should focus on the 300 series because that is about executing the, any of the engagement which are there. So that 300 series becomes a very critical point, which we need to be aware of because 300 series is something which would be adding a lot of value uh, in terms of your day-to-day forensic engagement, which you go into, and it becomes a good guidance for anyone who wants to uh, basically on this one. Okay, so those areas we need to focus on and take it uh, forward. Any questions, Nidhi ma'am, or anyone? Just let me just message. Yes, we have some time. I think then in that manner, I just, Nidhi ma'am, okay. Nidhi
Hello.
ma'am, any questions?
Hi.
Yeah, ma'am. Any questions?
Yeah, sir. Just a moment. Okay. Yeah, sir. Um, the one is how to apply Benford law in audit of loans and advances so as to identify frauds.
Okay, that's a good point. So next time when we are applying Benford law, I would say you need to follow FAI's 410, which talks about applying data analysis. And see, Benford law, as we all know, as the first digit law or rule, is something which we use it in mostly to figure it out whether the data which we are actually analyzing out here is natural data or made up data. So if you want to basically see, I'm just thinking it loud, and just Benford law will not be very helpful. But if you try to use it, Bennish model along with Benford law, you get something like I can actually know that if this financial of an organization which has submitted something for bank loan, they have submitted some kind of statement or anything as such, I can actually figure it out very clearly whether that is what we call it as a statistically has the financial being tampered with. If the M score is more than minus 2.22, we will always know that there is something which is not okay in this statement. Then I will know that there are some sub areas which are there, like DSRI and other things which is there, day sales invisible index and other index. So there I can actually figure it out that the sales data which has been actually submitted out there or anything as such, is it actually what we call as a natural data, or is that not natural data? And for everyone, I don't want to go into the Benford law, but I hope all of you know that in Benford law, we actually go against the law of, what we call it as, what we think is that a number 0 to 9 will be actually having equal probability of coming out there. But in Benford law, will say that no, digit 1 will be coming more than 30%, 2 will be coming it out there. And when we see the variance out there. So that is something which I can actually say that if I have to explain Benford law, it will take a whole night, and it's already a Friday night. I'm sure all of you are actually wanting to go back home and actually do it. So I'll not do it. But in any case, if you have any questions, you can drop me. I have
Sir.
some,
One more question, sir. Are there any checklists for implementing FAIS?
Very good question. In fact, the team which was working on drafting of this, we actually thought of coming out with a kind of a maturity model and anything as such where we can actually give a document to a person or a professional that we can see, okay, have I done this? Have I done this? Have I done this after I complete an engagement? But then there was another point of view or another school of thought which came that it's a principle-based standard, and I'm sure Durgesh Bhai told about that in the beginning. So there are many things which are based on the judgment of the professional who's working on, and there is no one size fit all. So from that perspective, I will say that it will be very tough to come out with a checklist or anything as such. But yes, I can tell you one thing. If you want to see that, okay, if I'm doing an engagement, what are the key things which I need to follow? I would say the first thing you should try and basically follow it up is 200 and 300 series, because it's all about the executing, making sure the planning which you're doing it for execution and executing the assignment. So these two things, if we just cover it up, that itself could be a great area to deal with. That's from my side.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Nice deliberation, sir. As all good things come to an end, so is the webinar also. So, with these warm words and kind messages, we move on to the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much, sir.
Pleasure, ma'am.
So, could
Thank
you remember
Thanks,
I took your first batch in Indore?
yes, ma'am. I remember. That's the reason, ma'am. When I saw Nidhi, ma'am, I was smiling at that.
And I
So
got,
it's a pleasure.
and sir, I got first prize in that batch also, highest marks.
Amazing. So it's a small word, Nidhi, ma'am. So it's like,
Yeah.
just comes back to that. Amazing meeting you again. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good night. Hello. Yeah.